This, my friends, is Patrick, and this is what pushed him into the pot industry.
Our primary specialty is medical malpractice insurance, and then commercial insurance as well. So really spent a lot of time on the malpractice insurance. But what started to happen was the clinic, Cleveland Clinic and university hospitals started buying all of our practices, just left and right. And so we had about a 2-year period of time where we probably lost about $5 million in premium through the hospital acquiring these practices.
Now, pot is definitely a polarizing topic. I'm pretty sure many of you watching this episode are probably thinking, she's talking about pot. But you're still watching. So there are a lot of people in our industry who don't just not sell pot insurance. Like, you know, you don't just not insure pet shops or dentist offices or horse racing facilities because they're just not your niche. You might actually have gone down that road if life had led you there. But with pot, people intentionally stay away from it. And hey, that is somewhat warranted. There are some serious regulatory complications, like the fact that many state governments are all in, but the federal government has said, not today. Which causes many banks to be uninterested in doing business with either the industry or those supporting the industry.
The banking issue is a big issue that Cannassure's had to deal with. We've lost, knock on wood, the last couple of years, we haven't lost our bank, but there's a period we lost our bank 6 times in 5 years.
And this leaves tons of pot shops who are storing millions of dollars in cash in their store.
We're carrying $100,000, $200,000 worth of cash. Brinks and Loomis and Garda, they're carrying $3, $4, $5 million in cash.
More susceptible than the average business to burglary.
Typically, we tried to have 2 banks, one we're with and one we're going to when they shut us down. You know, it's just another fire drill that you kind of learn to go through in this industry.
Not to mention that the federal government could raid a shop at any point in time.
You okay?
Yeah, I told them.
What? Why?
They were gonna arrest you.
Oh, beautiful stack work. A lot of these raids, you open the safe, it's disgusting. You almost don't want to take it. Gentlemen, take it. This is evidence.
Total honesty, I've actually learned a ton about the cannabis industry from watching like 6 Netflix documentaries and 2 TV shows. And on top of all of that, public perception of the industry is still
Going to do a renewal for one of the Mcmanamon insurance customers. And as I'm at that renewal with my father, he says to me, why don't you tell them what you're thinking about doing? And I didn't want to because I hadn't really had a business plan. I had a little bit of a plan and some, rough numbers in a spreadsheet, but it wasn't anything great. And I start telling him, and him and his attorney start dying laughing. And I just kind of expected that.
All right, but let's step on a scale. Let's break this down. Let's look at each one of these scare factors individually. Guys, here's the thing about public perception. It changes. Dudes, I am literally a living example of this principle. Before this day right here, I couldn't get married in most states. But today, my partner and I could get married in any state, anywhere in the country. And the world hasn't ended. We've come a long way from even 50 years ago when people like me had to either stay in the closet or face being outcast. Now, in terms of public perception, the cannabis industry will be no different. Just look at how many states are on board today as opposed to 10 years ago. And North American cannabis sales grew by an unprecedented 30% in 2016 to 6.7 billion. Last year in 2017, it grew even faster to 9.7 billion. So, will public perception change? Absolutely, I think it will. Look, I am not gonna lie, federal government raids sound incredibly scary.
The Associated Press has an article out on the crackdown of growing operations in Colorado. They say police and federal agents arrested more than...
And that guy's voice is not helping. But here's what I've learned in my research and in talking with Patrick. Yes, there's potential for the feds to come in and absolutely do damage to a totally legitimate cannabis establishment. And it does happen. But more often than not, the government seems to be trying to crack down on illegal buying and selling.
And, a lot of the raids are well deserved. We had a business in Colorado. I was in Colorado, I want to say 2 years ago, at a business event. And news broke at that event that somebody had just been raided. Happened to be one of our customers, I thought. And as I'm looking at the story and I'm looking online, you come to realize it wasn't our customer. It was the place next door to our customer that got raided, because what happened was our customer did everything right and leased their space, had everything approved by the state and the city and the county, and was cultivating cannabis in that location and processing as well. Well, some young, ingenious young man decided to move next door and rent the suite next door, and he himself decided to do an illegal grow operation, hoping to mask his power needs with the one next door to it. And what happened was people got wise to it, and the business owners around said, we're not going to have this problem. And they show this thing on the news where it's got our business owner's door with their logo on it, and then the door right next to it is not marked, and that's the one that's open, and that's the one that everyone's going into. Well, the news thought it was our business, when in reality it was not our business. It was just in a completely illegal grow operation that was put in right next door.
Now, yes, Patrick did have a pretty rough experience with a bank, but it hasn't all been that terrible.
You have mostly are going to be state chartered banks, and credit unions have stepped up and have really picked up the slack because they see an opportunity. There's one in Colorado you can read. It's called Safe Harbor Credit Union. When they opened their doors a couple years ago during the recreational boom, they've been taking in over $100 million. They've taken in $100 million a month in cash. So, as a small organization that doesn't usually get that much, now all of a sudden you're getting between $80 and $100 million a month on deposit. You can charge a pretty significant amount to handle that money for those businesses. So it's a good opportunity for them to generate money. And then also from the business standpoint, business owners are, most of us have been kicked around a lot. And so once you find kind of a vendor that you're willing to work with, it's really hard to replace that vendor unless you're going to give something away for free. And no one's giving anyone anything away for free.
Okay, let's turn the doom and gloom tables over, because you might be surprised to hear that even with the pain points we discussed, this is actually a fantastic industry to consider right now. When Patrick first entered the industry because one of his old high school friends was opening up a shop in California.
And he was telling me that he was getting ready to open up a marijuana dispensary. And I just started laughing. I said, well, what are you talking about? And he started to try and explain it to me. And I still didn't quite really believe him. This is a guy, his nickname in college and high school was Cheese, and still is. That is a 40-year-old man. He goes by the nickname of Cheese.
He had a really rough time finding a carrier that would actually work with him.
I just spent some time and tried to find it. It took me a little bit of time. I called, all the wholesalers and the brokers that we knew here in Cleveland, and basically everybody just started laughing and hung up. I started calling the national ones, and really same thing, just what are you talking about? No, this is crazy. We can't help you.
And he had a tough time finding a policy that was actually worth something.
But as you start to read through the policy, that first policy, you're like, this doesn't cover anything at all.
But he didn't see this as a barrier. He saw it as an opportunity to create change, to make an impact from the ground up. See, what Patrick is doing is not just selling cannabis insurance. He is literally creating cannabis insurance as we speak. I'm guessing that some of us probably have an image that just pops up into our head when someone says pot shop. Maybe that old friend whose high school nickname was Cheese, who decided on a whim to move to Cali, buy out a little space, and start selling some weed. But I'm telling you right now, that image couldn't be farther from the truth.
But we then went to this event, and at that event, which was in the basement of the Hilton in Times Square, we met Troy Dayton, who runs Arcview Group, Steve D'Angelo, who runs Harborside Health Center. But most importantly, who I met were a lot of bankers and lawyers from Wall Street firms, and they were younger people, which, that didn't surprise me. But what did surprise me as I thought about it was, this is a Tuesday afternoon, And these guys are here. These guys are not allowed to leave their office unless somebody tells them to leave their office and go somewhere. When you look at a state like Ohio, where we are, that now has medical marijuana as well, I would be, it costs $600,000-700,000 at a minimum just to apply for the license. And then you're talking about committing anywhere from $8 to $12 million for a cultivation facility. So I don't know how many people would fit into that stereotype. I think at the time, I don't know what they were doing, but they were doing multi-millions in sales. Now they're doing probably 35, 40, 50 million bucks out of their location.
$40 million? Holy crap. Guys, these are legitimate business owners. Your friend Cheese does not have $40 million in his back pocket. Okay, I'm not talking about the weed culture here, although that is a super fascinating topic. I'm talking about the business culture that's created by having people with such open-minded, accepting philosophies running the show.
They care more about other things. People care about treating their employees well, about making sure their employees are paid, about making sure they have access to health care and retirement plans, where in a normal factory job, you're not going to see that. I mean, you may see it it's more of an aberration than it is the norm. And I think here it's more the norm because the culture of marijuana from the beginning of time has been a more accepting culture. And they're more trusting, they're more understanding, they're more willing to work with you and go forward. And I find that to be one of the most rewarding things. I've had a lot of relationships, and I've got more friends in the marijuana business than I ever did working for my father for 7 or 8 years.
Right now is a real time of need for people who are inside the cannabis industry, and having someone like Patrick who's truly in it, who is honest, who has his client's best interest at heart, seems to be building deeper relationships than what we would define as deep relationships in other industries who aren't going through this type of hardship right now.
As we went forward, I just continued to move and said, I'm not quitting. Now we have 14 people that work for us here. We're going to be moving into a new office space here shortly. We're probably going to more than double our staff in the next 18 months. And we're really looking forward to kind of the future here because, the opportunities that are available to this industry, the opportunities they provided to me and my family and to the people that work for us here, I wouldn't give any of that away ever. It's been a really rewarding experience, and the frustrations I think are actually the most fun and the hardest problems that we deal with on a day-to-day basis that usually aren't really related to insurance or just related to business is really the most challenging and the most fun I have every single day. And I couldn't imagine not doing it.
And that is pretty much it for this episode. I would love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever considered this industry? Do you know somebody who wants to consider this industry? What do you think about it? And if you haven't considered it at all, maybe think about it.